The dock lights flickered like dying stars against the black water. My hands were still wet from hauling nets when the sound hit me. Not the cry of gulls, not the hum of engines, but laughter. My sister's laughter, sharp and triumphant, echoing from the deck of a boat that wasn't hers to claim. Beside her stood my father, chin raised high, holding up a sheaf of papers as if they were trophies. Deeds, contracts. My fishing business, my sweat, my sleepless mornings, my blood under the nails, signed away without my consent. The crowd of relatives and neighbours cheered, clapping as though this theft was some kind of noble sacrifice. My sister waved, smug and glowing, as if a PhD paid for with betrayal was something to be proud of. I stood at the edge of the pier, the salt burning my lips, my chest tight with rage. They thought this humiliation would break me, but they didn't know. They didn't know I had already bought them out. Cliffhanger reversal, foreshadowed. Most people inherit land, homes, or maybe a business polished with family pride. What I inherited was the sea. Every morning before the sun rose, the waves were already calling. Cold spray against my skin, the grit of salt clinging to my eyelashes, the slap of wet rope against the deck. It was a rhythm I'd known since childhood. While other kids slept in, I was out with my father on the water, learning how to cast nets, read the tide, and listen to the whispers of the wind. By the time I was 25, the business wasn't just a livelihood, it was a part of me. I had expanded our single rusted boat into a small fleet of 3. Painted them myself, bright blue with white trim, the colours standing out against the dull grey of the harbour. I replaced cracked planks, fitted sturdier nets, and kept ledgers so clean they could make an auditor smile. The work was brutal. Fingers raw from rope burns, back sore from hauling weight heavier than my own body. But when the sun rose golden over the horizon, spilling light across water so smooth it looked like glass, I felt rich in a way money couldn't measure. But not everyone saw it that way. My family's pride never lived on the water. My father had dreams for my sister Samina, the golden child. She was brilliant, no doubt. Books were her nets, classrooms her ocean. She spoke of theories and experiments while I spoke of tides and fish counts. To my father, one was respectable. The other, just survival. It started small, the favoritism. My mother bragging at weddings about Samina's scholarships, while I stood quietly in the corner, smelling faintly of diesel fuel and salt. Relatives would clap my sister on the back, calling her doctor-to-be, while I was the one who slipped money into their hands when bills came due. I didn't resent her, not at first. She was my sister. I wanted her to succeed. When she needed books, I gave her money. When she had late-night study sessions, I covered her share of house chores. My business kept food on the table, and that was enough for me. Until it wasn't. The first sting came on a humid afternoon 2 summers ago. We had pulled in a record catch that week, and I decided to host a small dinner for the family. I grilled fish fresh from the sea, the air filled with smoke and spice. Neighbours gathered, children ran barefoot across the dock, laughter mixing with the crash of waves. I waited for my father to say something, anything, about the success. Instead, as the plates were passed around, he clinked his glass and announced, "Samina has been accepted into a prestigious PhD program abroad." The crowd erupted in cheers. All eyes turned to her, glowing under the lantern light. My grilled fish sat untouched, the smoke curling upward like a forgotten offering. I smiled, clapped along, swallowed my pride. But inside, something shifted. For the first time, I realized no matter how much I built, it would never be enough. That night, as I cleaned the nets alone, I found a rusted compass at the bottom of a crate. My father had given it to me when I was 12, saying, "The sea will never lie to you." I held it in my hand, the metal cold, the needle trembling, but steady. It struck me then, the compass was the only inheritance I could truly count on. A reminder that while they chased prestige, I had direction, and that direction was mine alone. Still, the favoritism grew. My father began dipping into the business funds, just a little, to cover Samina's tuition shortfalls. At first, I didn't argue. She was family. But a little turned into a lot. Accounts bled without explanation. Promises were made but never repaid. I worked longer hours, cut my own pay, repaired boats with second-hand parts, and each time I asked for accountability, my father's words were the same. Don't worry. It's for the family. But deep down, I knew what it really meant. For Samina. The resentment I had tried so hard to bury began to stir, and I couldn't shake the feeling that one day, their family decisions would cost me more than money. Cliffhanger ending. And I couldn't shake the feeling that one day, their family decisions would cost me more than money. The storm didn't come all at once. It built slowly, like dark clouds stacking on the horizon, each one heavier than the last. At first, I only noticed the missing deposits. Small amounts skimmed from the business accounts. Easy to overlook, easy to excuse. But when I went to pay for new engine parts one morning, the supplier shook his head. Your credit line's maxed out. My stomach dropped. I had never missed a payment in my life. My ledgers were flawless. But when I looked through the books, I found withdrawals signed by my father. Not for boat repairs, not for crew wages. No, these were tuition payments, flights, rent for an apartment my sister never told me about. When I confronted him, he didn't flinch. You'll get it back, he said, waving a hand like it was nothing. Your sister's future is more important than engines and ropes. Engines and ropes. That was how he described the lifeline I'd built, the blood and salt that paid for his roof, his meals, even his shoes. I clenched my jaw and said nothing. Because what was there to say? To argue was to be branded selfish, ungrateful. But it didn't stop there. Soon, whispers spread along the dock. My crew, men who had worked with me for years, started asking if the business was in trouble. Word was out that my father had been telling relatives I was reckless with money, that I couldn't handle the accounts without him. It was a lie so cleanly told that people believed it. Suddenly, the respect I had earned with sweat and seawater was slipping through my fingers. Nights became unbearable. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the old fan, my mind racing. Every sound in the house grated on me. The clink of dishes, my sister's laughter through the walls, my parents' muffled conversations. My body was there, but I was adrift, floating farther from shore. The toll showed in my work. One morning, I miscalculated the tide and we nearly lost a net. Another day, I cut my hand deep while fixing a rusted bolt, blood soaking into the wood until the deck looked like a crime scene. The sea had always been my refuge, but now even the waves felt hostile, crashing too hard, pulling me under. Still, I carried on. What else could I do? But the humiliation reached a peak the night of a family gathering. My uncle, drunk on cheap whiskey, slapped me on the back and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe you should sell those boats before they sink you, eh? Put the money where it matters. Samina's degree." Laughter erupted around the room. My mother chuckled, though her eyes darted away from mine. And my father? He sat there smiling, like he agreed. I felt my face burn. The same hands that had built everything they lived off were now being mocked in front of neighbors and cousins. I wanted to shout, to throw the compass my father gave me right at his feet, and tell them all I was done. But I didn't. I just tightened my fist until my nails dug into my palm. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at the docks, watching the moon ripple across the water. The air smelled of brine and diesel, and in that silence, I thought for the first time, maybe I can't win this fight. And then, like fate answering, someone sat beside me. It was Ahmed, an older fisherman whose hands looked like driftwood from decades at sea. He'd always kept to himself, but that night he lit a cigarette, handed me one, and said, "They're bleeding you dry, son." The smoke curled between us, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. "You've got more spine than they'll ever give you credit for," he continued. "Don't let them make you small. The sea doesn't respect weakness, and neither should you." His words struck deeper than any insult, because in that moment I remembered who I was, not just their son, not just the forgotten brother. I was the one who kept the tide turning for everyone. For the first time, Someone reminded me I wasn't alone. Cliffhanger ending. For the first time, someone reminded me I wasn't alone. The weeks that followed blurred together, each one heavier than the last. My sister had flown abroad for her PhD, and my father was prouder than ever. He wore it like a badge of honor, telling anyone who would listen, "She's studying at one of the best universities in the world. My daughter will be a doctor." And then, inevitably, the words that cut me every time. "My son? He runs the boats." It wasn't even said with malice, just dismissal. A flick of the hand, as though my entire life's work was a side hustle barely worth mentioning. But what I didn't know was that things were about to get worse. Much worse. One humid morning, as I was mending a torn net on the dock, two men in suits approached. They looked out of place. Polished shoes, crisp collars, briefcases that screamed city life. "You the owner of Alvey Fisheries?" one asked. "I am," I replied, standing slowly. "Not according to these papers." He opened his case and laid out documents stamped with signatures. My father's, my mother's, even my sister's, though she was half a world away. Together, they had signed over controlling shares of the business. To them, I was no longer the majority owner. My throat tightened. "That's impossible." "These boats are mine. I built this with my own hands." The man didn't even flinch. "According to these filings, your family sold their stakes to cover tuition and loans. You're a minority shareholder now. Any big decisions go through them." The words hit harder than any wave I'd ever faced. My knees almost buckled. They had done it, stripped me of control, of dignity, of everything I had poured my soul into. When I stormed home, papers clutched in my fist, I found my father waiting calmly at the table. He didn't deny it. "You're young," he said, his voice annoyingly calm. "You'll rebuild." "But Samina's education? That's once in a lifetime. She will raise this family higher than fishing ever could," I wanted to scream, to tear the compass from my pocket and smash it against the wall. But the weight of betrayal was too heavy. All I could whisper was, "You didn't just sell shares. You sold me." His silence was answer enough. In the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own life. Crewmen looked at me with pity, not respect. Relatives called asking for updates, not on me, but on Samina. And everywhere I turned, it felt like my family's choice had been carved into stone. He doesn't matter. She does. I nearly gave up then, truly. I thought about selling my boat, walking away, starting over somewhere no one knew my name. But then, fate nudged me again. One evening, Ahmed found me sitting alone on the dock, staring at the papers. He chuckled, not with cruelty, but with the sharpness of a man who'd seen it all. "You think they beat you?" he asked. "They've taken everything," I muttered. He shook his head. "Not everything. You kept every receipt, every ledger, every contract since the day you started, didn't you?" I frowned. "Of course. I run a clean business. Then you've got more power than you think. Your name is on every boat license, every supplier deal, every wage slip. The sea doesn't lie, son, and neither do the books." His words lit a fire in me. For weeks I had felt stripped bare. But he was right. I had proof. Proof of where the money came from, where it went, and who actually kept this family afloat. That night, I spread out every ledger across my table. Ink stains on my fingers, papers stacked like soldiers. I saw what my family refused to admit. The business wasn't theirs to take. It had always been mine. And though I didn't know when, I realized something with crystal clarity. One day, I would make them see it. Cliffhanger ending. They thought they still had control. They didn't. The storm had broken open. Now, every day felt like a battle. Not against the sea, but against my own blood. It started with whispers. Relatives who once came to me for help suddenly kept their distance. A cousin casually mentioned over tea, "Uncle said you were gambling the company money away. That's why he had to step in." The words burned hotter than boiling oil. Gambling? I hadn't even touched a card deck since I was a teenager. But I saw how quickly the rumor spread, weaving through the family tree like rot. Next came the smear campaigns on the docks. Suppliers raised their eyebrows when I placed orders. Heard your boats might be repossessed, one muttered. Another asked if I'd be shutting down soon since the smart one in the family was studying abroad. Each jab chipped at my reputation, and reputation in the fishing trade is everything. Without trust, your nets may as well be empty. At home, things were worse. My mother avoided my eyes, as though silence was safer than truth. My father barely spoke unless it was to dismiss me. And Samina? She sent cheerful emails from overseas, filled with photos of libraries and lectures, oblivious to the chaos left in her wake. Or maybe she wasn't oblivious at all. Maybe she just didn't care. I felt cornered. The walls of my own home pressed in on me, suffocating. Nights were sleepless, filled with the groan of the ceiling fan and the echo of betrayal replaying over and over. But this time, instead of sinking, I fought back, quietly, strategically. Every ledger, every receipt, every bank slip, I organized them into neat binders. I traced every payment I'd made for Samina's books, her flights, her tuition, even the apartment rent disguised as business expenses. The paper trail was as sharp as a blade. And then I expanded my circle. Ahmed introduced me to an accountant he trusted, a man who had handled audits for shipping companies. Together we combed through my files, and the accountant raised his eyebrows. "They've committed fraud without even realizing it," he said. "If this went to court, you'd walk away with everything." That was the first night in months I slept with a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, my family ramped up their war. My father called a family meeting, gathering relatives in our living room. The air smelled of chai and tension. He cleared his throat and declared, "For the good of the family, we are considering selling the fleet. The money will go towards Samina's research and securing her future abroad." I sat there, fists clenched beneath the table. No one looked at me, not even once. To them, I was already written out of the story, but I said nothing, not yet. Instead, I excused myself, walked outside, and stared at the boats rocking gently in the moonlight. The smell of salt and tar wrapped around me like armor. My father thought I was broken. He thought I'd given up. He had no idea I was sharpening my blade. The symbolic compass never left my pocket. I'd touch it during moments of doubt, feeling the cool metal press against my palm, reminding me that the sea doesn't lie. And neither do numbers. As the weeks passed, the divide grew sharper. My family leaned harder into their version of events. I was reckless, irresponsible, unfit to lead. Their allies multiplied, relatives, neighbors, even people on the dock who benefited from my father's handouts. But quietly, my allies were forming too. Crew members who had seen me bleed on the deck, suppliers who knew my payments were always on time. Ahmed, steady as the tide, whispering encouragement when the nights felt too heavy. And in the growing silence between me and my family, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a feud anymore. It was a war, and I was done playing defense. I began preparing my case, one binder at a time. My home became a war room, papers stacked like ammunition, each page a bullet of proof, because I knew the day of reckoning was coming. And when it arrived, no one, not even my golden sister, would be able to stop it. Cliffhanger ending. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The day came sooner than I expected. It was a blistering afternoon when I received the notice, a formal family shareholders meeting called by my father. Location, the town hall conference room. Agenda, the future of Alvi Fisheries. Future. The word burned like acid. I already knew what it meant. They were going to finalize the sale of my fleet, wipe my name from the business I had built with my own blood and bone. I almost didn't go. For a brief, weak moment, I thought, what's the point? They've already won. But then I felt the compass in my pocket, its weight grounding me. No, the point was that I had fought too hard to let them erase me quietly. The room was already crowded when I arrived. Relatives, neighbors, a few suppliers who had been invited as observers. My father sat at the head of the table, smug and composed. My mother sat beside him, eyes downcast. And on the projector screen, live from overseas, was my sister Samina, smiling as if nothing could touch her. The chatter quieted as I walked in. I could feel the eyes on me, the whispers. That's him. The reckless one. The failed one. My father cleared his throat. We are here to make an important decision. The business is struggling. It is in everyone's best interest to liquidate the assets and use the funds to secure a brighter future for this family. For Samina, applause. Nods. Murmurs of agreement. I stood there, fists clenched. The humiliation was thick, pressing down on me. And then, silence fell. My father leaned back, smiling faintly, and said, "Unless anyone has objections?" That was my moment. I walked to the front of the room, my boots echoing against the floor. From my bag, I pulled a thick binder and dropped it on the table with a heavy thud. Papers spilled out, neatly tabbed and dated. "I have an objection," I said, my voice calm but sharp as glass. The room shifted. People leaned forward. My father's smile faltered. "These," I continued, flipping open the binder, "are the ledgers for every year I've run this business. Every payment logged, every loan repaid, every tuition fee disguised as a business expense, every rent check for Samina's apartment taken straight out of the company's funds." Gasps spread across the room. My mother covered her mouth. Even through the projector screen, I saw my sister's smile drop. "And these," I added, pulling out official licenses and supplier contracts, "are all under my name. Not my father's, not my sister's, mine. The law is very clear. The one who holds these documents is the legal owner of the fleet, not the shareholders, not the family committee. Me." The silence was deafening. My father's face flushed red, his hands trembling as he slammed the table. "You think papers make you stronger than blood?" I locked eyes with him, steady, unshaken. "Blood doesn't give you the right to steal. And papers? Papers prove the truth." The weight of my words hung in the air. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. One supplier spoke up cautiously. "If these documents are real, then he's right. The business belongs to him." The tide turned in an instant. Murmurs spread, eyes shifting toward me, not with pity this time, but with respect. My mother's lips trembled. My sister shook her head furiously on the screen, shouting, "This is ridiculous. He's twisting everything." But her voice cracked, and everyone heard it. I reached into my pocket and placed the compass on the table. The metal gleamed under the harsh lights. "This," I said softly, "was my father's gift. He said the sea never lies. Well, neither do numbers. Neither does the truth." The room was silent. My father's empire, his control, his lies, his favoritism, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. And for the first time in years, I felt taller than him. I looked around the room, my voice calm and resolute. "I don't want apologies. I want change. This business will no longer bleed for one person's dreams while the rest of us drown. From today forward, Alvi Fisheries answers only to me." The last word echoed, sharp and final. Cliffhanger ending. In that silence, I watched the empire they built on my back collapse into dust. The meeting ended not with applause, not with shouting, but with silence. A silence so heavy it pressed into every corner of the room. My father's hands trembled on the table. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother sat frozen, tears welling, but never falling. And on the screen, my sister stared at me with wide, furious eyes, caught between disbelief and rage. In that moment, the empire they built on my back collapsed. By the next week, the fallout began. Suppliers who had once doubted me came forward, shaking my hand firmly. "We knew you ran an honest business," one said. "The truth always comes out." Crew members who had been cautious before now stood taller beside me, their loyalty solidified. Relatives? They shifted their allegiances as quickly as the tide. The same uncles who once mocked me were suddenly full of praise. "We always knew you had it in you." Their words meant nothing, but I let them speak. I no longer needed their approval. My father avoided me. For the first time in my life, The man who had towered over me now couldn't meet my eyes. Pride had been his armor, and I had shattered it. My mother tried to bridge the silence with gentle words, but I kept my distance. Too much had been taken to pretend things could go back to normal. And Samina. The emails stopped. No more cheerful updates. No more photos of libraries and lectures. From relatives, I heard she was angry, humiliated. She called me selfish, claimed I had ruined her chance to change the world. But the truth was simple. She had tried to change her world by destroying mine. And I wasn't going to apologize for protecting what I had built. For a while, I threw myself back into the business. Repairs, expansions, new contracts. My hands bled from rope burns again. My back ached from hauling nets. But this time, every drop of sweat felt clean. Untainted. Mine. Yet something inside me had shifted. The business wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about proving myself to them. It was about freedom. So, slowly, I began to dream bigger. I invested in better boats, sturdier nets, hired more crew. I started selling directly to markets instead of middlemen. For the first time, the profits grew faster than I could have imagined. One evening, months later, I stood on the dock watching the sunset. The sky was painted gold and crimson, waves glowing like fire beneath the fading light. In my hand, I held the compass. It no longer felt like a reminder of my father's authority. It felt like a symbol of everything I had reclaimed. I had it framed in a shadow box and hung it in my office, a reminder that direction comes from within, not from those who try to steer you into storms. The house felt quieter after that. My parents kept mostly to themselves. They had lost their control, their pedestal. And though we shared meals occasionally, the bond was cracked, fractured in ways that would never heal. I wasn't bitter. I was just done carrying their weight. Instead, I built something new, a chosen family. Crew members who became brothers, Ahmed who became a mentor, and even new friends in the market who respected me not for my bloodline, but for my work. Peace came slowly, like a tide rolling in. One morning, as I stood barefoot on the deck with the wind against my face, I realized I no longer felt that knot of resentment in my chest. For the first time in years, I could breathe deeply without tasting bitterness. I thought back to that first sting. The night my grilled fish was ignored in favor of Samina's announcement. I had felt invisible then, forgotten. But now, as gulls circled overhead and the sea stretched endless before me, I understood something my family never did. Worth isn't measured in titles or applause. It's measured in resilience, in knowing you held the line when no one else believed you could. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. Cliffhanger ending of hope. The sea had given me back everything I'd lost, and this time, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who should have lifted you up? I know what that feels like, to be dismissed, humiliated, and treated like your worth belonged to someone else. My family thought they could erase everything I built. They thought they could write me out of my own story. But worth isn't something they hand you. It's something you claim for yourself. So, I want to hear your story. Have you ever faced favoritism, betrayal, or control disguised as love? How did you rise above it? Share it in the comments because your voice might be the one that reminds someone else they're not alone. This wasn't just my fight. It's a reminder for anyone who's been underestimated. Your beginning might just start here,